Thanks for joining us with yourlocalnote.com for another featured podcast. And this podcast, we're going to feature the Miners. And they've got an EP we're going to talk about. It's called Miners Rebellion. And we're going to start off with the title track. We'll get to that in just a second. But just want to let you know that we are streaming 24/7. We got free apps. All you have to do is go to the respective app stores and just type in YLN. And you download the app for free and bring yourlocalnote.com with you anywhere you go. Also, we've got a weekly newsletter you can get. Just email us at contact@yourlocalnote.com. Okay, we got the Miners coming up next. We've got Keith and Andy here, and we will talk to them in just a few minutes. But we're going to start off with the title track of their last EP, and it's called Miners Rebellion, right here on yourlocalnote.com.
Virginia came 13,000 strong. Riding loose the old special Boone County where they meet. Take on Sheriff Chafin and his anti-union fleet. On Blair Mountain they would die. Couldn't resist the Union cry. Broken promises, Chafin won't be denied. Positions and weapons, no unions in his mind. Child with murder and treason, convictions overturned. Was the Miners Rebellion, union movement would not be spurned. On Blair Mountain they would die. Resist the Union cry. On Blair Mountain they would die. Couldn't resist the Union cry.
The song is called Miners Rebellion. That's the title track from the EP from the Miners, which came out last November. And you're listening to yourlocalnote.com. And we're hanging with Keith and Andy from the Miners. Welcome, guys. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. And why don't we first start with a little background on you guys, who you are, what you do with the band, and who's not here. Give them a shout out.
Sure.
Start with you.
I'm Keith Marlowe. I sing, play guitar. The primary songwriter in the band.
I'm Andy Shahan. I'm the drummer, sing background vocals, and I carry heavy stuff.
Okay. All right, who's not here?
Not here is David Thornburg. He plays pedal steel guitar for us.
Okay.
And Sean Benge, who plays bass.
Excellent. All right, why don't you give us a background on how you guys got together?
The Miners started in 2007. It was myself and another member who's no longer in the band, Matt McGuire, decided after years of not playing in a band to get something together. And so Andy came in as the drummer, and we had another bass player. Eventually, Matt, in 2009, decided to leave, and I took over the lead frontman spot. And we've had a couple different bass players, though. When Matt left, we brought in David as our pedal steel player, and really kind of took the band into this sound, this alt country sound,
right?
That we have now.
Excellent. And you mentioned that you had spent a couple years, or you took a couple years off. Is that correct? Or
yeah.
What made you stop, and then what made you get back in?
Stop was mostly a function of careers outside of music and family.
Okay.
And Andy and I have been playing together in bands since high school, which was the mid-'80s for us.
Okay.
And we had a band in Philadelphia in sort of the late 80s, early 90s scene called Tornado 5.
Right.
That played. It was an alternative band that played the club scene here. We played somewhat in New York at CBGB's and places like that. Mm-hmm. And that band, and there were sort of two iterations of it, disbanded in, I guess, around 91.
Right.
And Andy played in the music scene a little after that in another band called Hogan's Goat, but I went off actually to law school and didn't play in a band from about 92 till 2007.
Wow.
Keith was the first official sellout.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so Keith as the first official sellout. How difficult was it to get back into it then?
It was not as hard as I thought it would be.
Okay. Now, were you playing, just on the side, for fun, so keeping yourself musically, I guess, lack of a better word, but musically in tune?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I had a recording studio in my basement. I was writing songs, two of which are actually on the EP.
Okay.
Were written 12 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And they were in this sort of alt country vein. That's the songs I was writing. I played in law school. I played in a cover band as well. So I was playing, but I wasn't
not
in
doing
the
your
scene.
Own stuff.
Right, exactly. And when this band started, I was a little surprised because we hadn't played in a while, and we sort of got together and things clicked much quicker than I thought. And then also getting back into playing, booking shows, I sort of had this feeling like I hadn't been in the scene for 15 years.
And it changed
How am I going to get a show? Who do I know? But what I find actually is there's a lot of guys that we know from back in the 80s that are still playing in bands, or some of them own venues.
Right.
So it's a little different dynamic than back when we were in college and just out of college,
So it wasn't as difficult on one hand, but because things have changed, the way people are promoting, clubs are promoting, there's a lot of pressure on bands to bring along their own people. The clubs are looking at Facebook likes and who's following you on Twitter and things like that. So how difficult was that to adjust to?
Well,
really helped us out quite a bit, to be honest with you. I'm, I have a lot of friends on Facebook. He's got a lot of friends, and to be honest with you, once you get that out there, you never know who's going to show up. But
Sure.
it's always, normally if you get, 10% of who you have on,
Right.
It's always
That's a decent
really
crowd.
nice turnout. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to say, and back in the old days,
Right.
we had to send out mailers, and we
Yes.
had to go around and tack posters.
On South Street.
And now it's easy. It really is easy to get to promote a show,
Right.
To get the word out, and there's no cost to it either.
No, and from that standpoint,
Other than time.
Yes, from that standpoint, technology has helped in a certain way.
Without question.
It sounds like you guys then are, very media savvy or social media savvy, which is a big plus, because there's some bands who we've talked to, they're not, they do it, but it's not what they want to do. So it becomes tough for them.
Yes.
The more people that know you're playing, the more people are going to show up.
But you got to keep up on the social media stuff.
without
Right.
question. But it's
Yeah, I mean, we Facebook, we have a Twitter account. We sort of know the blogs and things
Sure.
like that, whether they're local or even national, that are in the genre of music that we play in. Radio airplay, honestly, we've gotten national and international
Right. See that on the
airplay because there's more outlets. There's internet radio and things like that.
So, yes, there are more outlets, which is great, but it's so fragmented and there's so much out there. Trying to cut through is the tough part.
That's true.
And
although there's a lot of focus, like we go after the stations that play Americana and alt country, and a lot of those stations are they may be internet radio stations, or
Sure.
they may be overseas, but it's easier to sort of find and access those. It's not like we have to send out, we have to print up thousands of promo records and send them to thousands of radio stations.
Yes, and hopefully a program director is not too busy to take a listen to it, or it doesn't get lost in the stacks of CDs. I used to be a program director, so I know exactly. I'm on the other side. You'd send it to me, and I'd be like, okay, well, let's see, where are we going to put this? So let me get my step stool and put it on top here. And it was tough, because then you had the record companies calling you and saying, oh, you got to listen to this, got to listen to that, and corporate radio saying, you should only be playing, this type of, or this many songs and all that other good stuff. It's quite interesting how it all works out. All right, let's go back to the first song, Miners Rebellion. Who wrote it? What is it about?
I wrote it, and it tells the story of the Miners Rebellion in West Virginia in 1921. Basically, I did some research.
Right.
I kind of wanted to have a song that sort of linked with the name of the band.
Sure.
And I think I may have seen like something on the History Channel about it. And my wife is actually a history teacher, so I watched that a lot. And so I sort of did some research, started thinking about it.
But were you called the Miners before you wrote this song?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the original name of the band since 2007.
And how'd that come about?
The former member, Matt, and I were throwing out ideas. We wanted something kind of linked to Pennsylvania.
Sure.
We thought of the name. We figured somebody's had to. It's not that unique a name. We did our internet and Google searches and couldn't find that anybody had ever used just the name The Miners. So we were like, all right, let's go.
easy enough, right?
Okay.
Now there are a couple others we find, but they all came after we did. So.
Okay, very cool.
And that's spelled with an ERS, by the way.
All right.
Right. We're minor league, but it's ER.
Got it. All right. So with writing this song, then you're looking at the history. Did you have music to go first with it, or did you find the story and then try to put music to the story?
I come from writing music. Back in our old band, Tornado 5, I wrote most of the music, but I didn't write any of the lyrics or vocals because we had another vocalist. So my mindset is usually music first, and then I come up with ideas. As I become sort of the chief songwriter, it's evolving a little bit.
Okay.
Sometimes now I do sort of put down lyrical ideas, have ideas, and then put music to it, but it's more usually I think about sitting with my guitar and I'm writing riffs and things like that, and I throw them down on a recorder or something, and then I also sort of think about ideas and write lyrics, and then I say, all right, I go back. This is a good this riff, 3 months later still sounds good. So
Right.
let me work this, and now let me start to go through my lyrical ideas and see what might
try to match it up that way. All right, I'll tell you what. Let's go to song number 2, and when we come back, we're going to continue to talk about their songwriting process. All right.
Okay.
All right. The song number 2 is called "I Recall." We're hanging with Keith and Andy from the Miners. This is from the EP that they released last November called "Miners Rebellion." Again, the song is called "I Recall" on yourlocalnote.com.
Every boy dreams that he's a cowboy or hitting a ninth-inning home run. Every man regrets he's not a cowboy, hates the look and what he's become. When I recall the choices I was given, when I recall the choices I have made, when I recall the wrong roads I have driven, when I recall, when I recall. Maybe I should move out to the country and leave this stress and trouble far behind. They tell me I'm just a silly dreamer to give it up and get back to the grind. When I recall the choices I was given, when I recall the choices I have made, when I recall the wrong roads I have driven, when I recall, when I recall. When I recall the choices I was given, when I recall the choices I have made, when I recall the wrong roads I have driven, when I recall, when I recall.
That's I Recall from the Miners. We're hanging with Keith and Andy on yourlocalnote.com for this week's featured podcast. All right, Keith, let's get back to the songwriting process. We'll just jump into this song, I Recall. Who wrote that song and what is it about?
Again, I wrote the song. I wrote all the songs on the EP. That song is more of a, let's call it sort of personal reflection.
Okay.
I had some changes going on in my life, more career oriented, and you sort of think back and you say, well, what if I had done this? What if I had done this? What if I had done this? Where would I be today versus where I am? And so that's sort of what that is what the song is about.
Okay,
and
so
I
that's
recall
that's a personal experience,
right?
Because my next question, the first song, "Miners Rebellion," was sort of a historical story, and you wanted to tie it into the fact that the band is called the Miners. Is that the only song like that, or is all your songwriting personal besides that song?
My songwriting varies. We have another song that's not on the EP that will probably be on our next release. That's another historical song. But then I have personal songs. I have about things that happened to me, or sometimes I kind of come up with generalizations. Another song on the EP, WTA, is sort of came from almost like a stereotype of me watching Cops.
All right, but it's still your personal observation.
It's an observation, yeah. But some things are. This is one of the songs on the EP, Cold Steel, is basically recounts the story of me getting held up at gunpoint.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's a very personal story, and we'll be talking about that in just a little bit. Okay, now back to the songwriting process. You say you have bits and pieces of lyrics and songs that you put together. Now, once you get an idea and start formulating it, do you bring it to the rest of the band? Do you bring it to Andy and say, hey, Andy, I'm working on this. What do you think?
A lot of time, he'll come with a riff or even a full chord progression that's completely done and ready to go. Mm-hmm. We can figure out what is the verse, what is the chorus, what is all that stuff, and then we just experiment. The good thing about this genre is that there's usually not too much that doesn't fit.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it makes it fairly easy for me playing drums or Sean playing bass. But it also gives it some wiggle room with David, who is very, very creative on the pedal steel guitar, to give it that alt-country feel.
Okay.
He'll usually come, if he has a song that's completely ready to go with lyrics, well, let's try this. And, we run through it a couple of times with different drum beats, different bass riffs, things like that. But normally they fall together fairly quickly.
Okay. So there's just basically tweaking as you're putting the song together.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes and I've been doing this more just because I've been doing a lot more recording, is that I will throw something down, in GarageBand or something like that, and just pick sort of a canned drum beat and bass line and say, well, here's the basis of the song now, so everybody kind of has an idea going in.
How it sounds.
Right, and then we'll go in and take it from there and sort of, expand on it and
mold everybody it up, slow it down.
Yeah, determine what, what's the tempo, I mean, the drum beats that I do are very basic, because I know Andy's going to do.
I do, but
but I know Andy's going to do something. I don't feel like spending hours trying to program drums anyway. It's not that exciting. So
but you want to give him just a basic feel for it. So
or at least what I'm thinking, and then go from there.
Well, you guys have known each other for a long time,
right?
So it must be fairly easy to know what he's trying to accomplish, Andy.
I mean, we met when I was 16, and he was 17. It was in 1985, I guess, right? And we did our first demo when we were still in high school, and I realized that it was difficult for me to actually think for myself.
Okay.
Basically, if Keith had an idea, he would let me know, and if I had an idea, you can't let your ego get in the way.
Right.
You got to let other people that are working with you in the band. I want to play this, or I want you to play this. So we've had years and years of being able to work off of each other, and definitely, why don't you try this or this without, like I said, egos getting in the way. And,
well, it's easy for you because you've known him so long.
Without question.
How long have you known the other members? Because I think the bass players just joined you last year, correct?
Yeah, but I've known him for even longer than I've known Keith.
All right. So
Andy actually played with him. We all went to Cheltenham High School, other than David. so Andy and Sean played in a band in high school together.
Right before I met Keith.
But I knew Sean in high school, but I never actually played in a band with Sean until now.
So sharing musical ideas and musical visions is not a difficult thing for you guys.
No, absolutely not. One thing that I did, we always shared different, styles, what was new, what was good, what was
right,
things like that. But in the time that Keith was talking about before, when he had taken time off and I was playing with a band called Hogan's Goat, I was exposed to what I think has been life-changing for me as far as the genre, seeing bands that should have been huge but aren't.
Yeah.
And some of them have split off and done other things like that.
Right.
The genre is actually taking off like mad fire right now. As far as I'm concerned, there was no better band than Uncle Tupelo, or and then they've split up into they're Wilco and Sunvol now, but I was able to see that genre a lot more in the band I was in prior to joining the Miners.
Okay, so you were playing in another band that was a different genre than what you are now.
Well, it's similar.
Okay.
Similar, but when Keith and I were in Tornado 5, it was more of an alternative college.
Yeah, it was.
Got it.
Was like a college, like sort of. When there really was alternative,
right?
Like, I mean, it was college radio stuff. I mean, our band got comparisons to like the Pixies and Throwing Muses and things and bands, which maybe a lot of your listeners have no idea who they are.
We like to think our listeners are very educated. This is all about music,
right.
So we think they have a good idea.
But Andy, one thing that Andy and I have always had is sort of a similar appreciation for the types of music that or the genre that we're in.
Right.
So we've evolved.
Absolutely.
From high school to Tornado 5 to now, but we've always sort of had similar tastes. I mean, we both like the same music.
So your influences are pretty similar.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yeah.
And that would be...
In this genre or
just
in general? I mean,
let's go through the progression.
My influences, and I'm not afraid to tell people this because I know some people say, I played in an all country band. I grew up listening only to Hank Williams, and
right.
that. I mean, I grew up listening to 70s radio, which was a mix of everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was disco, hard rock, country,
soft
novelty
rock.
Songs, soft rock.
Right, yeah.
So I was exposed to everything. I mean, I tell people, well, my real exposure to country was probably listening to Glenn Campbell on Top 40 radio. Mm-hmm. Now, I was never immersed in country music probably the way I am now back then. But then in high school, I was listening to Rush and the Police and
Van Halen
and stuff like that. I mean, that's the thing. That's the types of things we played. When I went to college, I kind of the switch turned on from the alternative side, and we really started to getting into bands like REM and the Hoodoo Gurus, and I think that's where I started to get the country bug, because some of these bands, even REM, probably the biggest influence for me was a band called the Long Riders, which were really, I would say, one of the early alt country bands, even though they kind of don't get the credit. And a lot of these bands were throwing in back then, and new wave. There was really a mix of all styles. I mean, new wave, you had rockabilly revival, and you had so there was really this mesh, and a lot of it would come through and be popular. Mm-hmm. And the country thing is where I. Back then is really where I started to get the bug, and even REM would say, "Oh yeah, they were influenced by Buck Owens." I'd be like, "Okay, I'm going to go buy some Buck Owens records and listen to them."
Sure.
And then thereafter, sort of the alt country, the Uncle Tupelo's scene, and that started taking off, and I at that time I started to become the old man, getting disgruntled with. All this new music out there, and so I started like listening, going back and buying like 50s and 60s country records, and really like listening to that, and I think that's where my sort of musical evolution occurred, and that's why I've really sort of stayed into this genre, which is, I mean, all country to me is a mix of sort of rock, alternative music. In fact, it really started as bands that were mostly punk bands.
Sure.
blending with traditional country.
Right.
The broader term now is Americana,
Right.
which I think is almost a ridiculous term because it's so broad.
Yeah.
It's a marketing scheme at this point. Bob Dylan goes and does an Americana tour. I mean, Bob Dylan's one of the most popular pop artists
Right.
in the
rock, yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
So what, now
still
he was
gets
a
played
folk,
on classic
he was
rock
folk and he
stations.
was rock and he was everything
Yeah.
else, but I don't know, does he have to go out and market Americana? That's why I think
shouldn't he
the
just say
term,
he's Bob Dylan?
Yeah,
Right, exactly
the term
right.
just sort of goes.
Yeah.
I think it's a little too broad. All countries. Some people say, well, all country was back in the early '90s. I think it's a good term because I think it's descriptive.
I
and
agree. And Andy, similar type of evolution with your musical taste and influences?
Absolutely. Keith and I started when we started playing together in high school. We're trying to put together Rush songs and stuff like that. And I had this huge drum kit that was absolutely just too much. And I came to practice one day and Keith had dismembered it down to a 4-piece. And he's like, just we need to keep it simple.
Okay.
But I would say that, but my primary drumming influence is Martin Chambers from the Pretenders.
Oh, okay.
Just rock solid.
Right.
Little fladinguses that make things a little interesting, but never
Sure.
anything that's just overly complicated.
Okay.
Mark Kingsmill from the Hoodoo Gurus, just rock solid. Bill Berry, just nothing too fancy, nothing too, swirly, just straight ahead backbeat drums.
Mm-hmm. Being the backbone of the band.
Trying to be, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Excellent.
And we were getting back into that genre of all country that Keith was talking about with like the late '90s bands like Dash Rip Rock, who
Okay.
were the Bottle Rockets from St. Louis. I mean, those are the guys that actually started, between that and your Uncle Tupelo's and
Okay.
things like that. That's why I think I really gained a lot of respect and just became a fan of the genre itself.
Okay. Very good. Very good. All right, let's go to the third song. We'll play it, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about it. I also want to talk about how you guys put the album together, and then we'll tell people where you're playing and where they can find your music. So that's all coming up next. But let's go to Cold Steel. We're hanging out with Keith and Andy from the Miners. This is off the Miners Rebellion EP. The song is called Cold Steel on yourlocalnote.com.
Slipped through the front door near closing just before. Clerk didn't give up cash, so he took her to the back. One thought was on his mind, cash and leaving time. Clad in a funny mask, revolver in ride. Thought it was a prank. I saw bullets in the tank. Pressure to crack the safe. Third try sealed my fate. Made off with $100. In the closet we were stuck until 5 minutes passed. Cops came, he was too fast. Cold steel against my head. One slip and I'd be dead. Mass boy with no regrets. Cold steel against my head. Police station I would sit, no suspects seemed to fit. Had my girl worried sick, big smile when I walked in. Recounted to the bar try to figure out what was lost. Quit my job the next day, wasn't worth the pay. Cold steel against my head, one slip and I'd be dead. Mass boy with no regrets, cold steel against my head. Against my head, one slip and I'd be dead. Mass boy with no regrets, cold steel against my head, cold steel against my head. One slip and I'd be dead. Mass boy with no regrets, got cash and then he fled.
The song is called Cold Steel on yourlocalnote.com. It's we're hanging with the Miners. Their EP is called Miners Rebellion. And I think you made a reference to this song before, Keith, about Cold Steel. This is actually a personal experience for you.
Right. This recounts. I was working at a record store in Olney called Strawberries, which was a chain.
I'm familiar with that.
Based out of Boston, which there's not a lot of record store chains anymore, I guess.
No, there's none. I actually, when I first got out of college, worked at the record store before I got into radio. So,
and I was an assistant manager, and one evening, right before closing, somebody came in, a kid with a Halloween mask on.
Yikes.
And a loaded revolver, and held us up and put a gun to my head to open the safe, and fortunately I did.
Yikes.
Or I wouldn't be talking to you.
Wow, that's got to be pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, so that's what the song's about.
Wow.
I remember that day vividly. Keith and I were roommates for a while, and I think at that point, we would talk every couple of days. Mm-hmm. And I just remember it was probably my first experience of a dear friend of mine that had been involved in something like that.
Right. That's scary.
You know, it was awful.
Okay. All right, then let's get to the EP, Miners Rebellion. You did touch on the fact that you have your own studio.
Right.
Did you record this EP in your studio, or did you go someplace else?
Well, it was a combination. All the tracks were recorded at my studio in my basement. And again, we're old guys, so
old school.
We're old school, as they say. And this was old school. It was recorded on half-inch roto-reel tape.
Oh, wow.
8-track.
Wow.
And we took those tracks that I had recorded, and then we went to Milk Boy, the studio,
right,
which is in town, and we actually mixed the EP there.
Oh, cool.
So it was a combination of recording it at my studio and then mixing it at sort of a higher.
We had a podcast about 2 weeks ago. They recorded their album at Milk Boy Studios. So I hear they're pretty easy to work with.
They're really, really good guys.
Excellent. Will you now, though, after that experience and with, you're saying you're old school, you did it old school way, but with technology now, will you maybe try to look to do it different, or are you gonna say, you know what, we're standing our ground and we're staying old school?
I think I'm gonna do a mix the next time. the technology helps with sort of the speed and efficiency.
Yes.
I like the sound of tape, and so, but I'm limited to what I have now, which is 8 tracks, and for some things, it's just a little too narrow. So I'm contemplating sort of doing a mix of maybe doing the basic tracks on tape, and then sort of dumping that into a what they call a DAW, digital audio workstation, and then adding sort of overdubs and things like that to expand. We don't need 48 tracks. I mean, 16 tracks to me is I'm going to have to figure out how to fill them all. That's probably about our limit.
Do you handle most of the recording, or does the band also help with that? The rest of the band help?
I mean, I do production and the engineering. We may also involve Milk Boy more. I'm not sure whether we may even record basic tracks there and then come back to my place and do overdubs. I do like having the flexibility of having unlimited time to figure out guitar parts and vocals and things like that.
Right. I mean, if you go to another studio, you got time constraints because of money.
If this was all we did, or this was our focus, and and somebody's paying for studio time, then I would probably say, fine, let's do everything at the studio. But I'd still probably say I want to do it on 24-track reel-to-reel tape if I could. But but that takes more time. It takes more money. It takes more effort. And the other thing, honestly, with tape is with the computer, you can do a lot more overdubs and things and keep them and do a part 17 times and keep all the takes.
Yeah,
you can't really do that with tape. And I'm not going to tell you we're the greatest musicians in the world, because we're not. So in some respects, it's a little easier for us to have that flexibility to say, you know what, I'm gonna do this vocal take 6 times and pick the best one versus doing it and erasing it and doing it and erasing it, which is really what you're doing with tape.
Yes. Okay. You did mention that you had at least one song written for a future album. Do you have more ready to go? Is there a time frame? I mean, it's coming up on a year with your last EP. Maybe beginning of next year is something.
Yeah.
Target date?
And the EP is our debut, so that's the only one. We are, in fact, on the way over, Andy and I were talking about the next one. And the goal, I think, is to start recording. We have, I would say, 80% of the songs either written or in process.
Okay.
We do about 5 of them in our current set.
Okay.
And then one is actually an older song that we just never recorded.
Okay.
And then, I think the goal is, and these timetables never work the way you want it to, but start doing some recording, maybe demos at my house over the winter, maybe sort of late spring, early summer, record.
Get it out for the summer
to release, maybe sort of the fall.
Okay.
Which is when the EP was released.
Okay.
Maybe sort of shoot for that. Hopefully,
cool.
Get it out before the end of the year. I think that would be
All right, let's go back to your debut EP. Where can people find it?
Well, it's available at. If you want it's available on CD and digitally. So CDs are available at our website, which is minersmusic.com. That's again with an E, not an O, and as well as Bandcamp. And digitally, also locally, actually, it's available at Main Street Music in Manayunk.
Oh, okay.
Hideaway Music in Chestnut Hill, and Siren Records in Doylestown.
Very nice.
Digitally, it's available Bandcamp, iTunes, Amazon, CD Baby, and a host of other things. It's streamed on, if you don't want to pay and you want to give us our 0.7 cents per stream or whatever it is, you can listen on Spotify and everything else.
Okay, very cool. As far as people where they can follow you, you got a Facebook page?
Yeah, we have a Facebook page, The Miners PA, it is. And we're on
Twitter,
which
where can people follow you?
The Miners PA as well.
Okay.
And then we have Reverb Nation and No Depression, which is sort of a site focused on alt country.
Okay.
where we've been featured. We have a page there as well.
Very cool. All right. I learned something new. I didn't realize you had your own site. That's great. All right. Before we get to the final song, let's talk about shows where we can see you play.
Well, our next show is at World Cafe Live upstairs on November 23rd.
Okay.
8 o'clock, we hit the stage,
Excellent.
playing with another band called Transistor Rodeo, which is another alt-country band.
Fantastic. And we'll keep up to date. Obviously, any future shows after that, we'll get it on our site.
Sounds
Absolutely.
great.
All right. Let's wrap things up with Doggone. Real quickly, Keith, tell us a little bit about this song.
This is another personal story probably a lot of people can relate to. It's exactly what it says the title is. It's about losing a pet.
Okay.
So I had a yellow lab of 13 years, and we had to put him down, and
Yes.
had
Just
to, I
went
wrote
through
a song. You know, it was emotional, and
It's hard.
you know, it was kind of, I was like, maybe it was a healing thing for me, but
Yeah, just went through that with my wife. Her cat she's had with her longer than she's had me.
Wow.
And he recently passed away, and it was not a easy thing to do. So interesting song there, guys. Andy, Keith, thank you so much for hanging with us.
thanks for having us.
Thanks so much
It's been
for having
great.
us. That's great.
All right, the Miners. We're wrapping it up with their song "Doggone." Their EP is called Miners Rebellion. Check that out. Go to their website, which is again minersmusic.com.
Right.
And you can find out all the information you need as far as where you can get the EP. Okay, again, thank you so much for joining us. And remember, we'll have a brand new podcast again next week. And of course, remember, you can download the free apps. We've got a newsletter that you can get. Just email us at contact@yourlocalnote.com. Sign up there, and we'll get it out to you every week. And don't forget, we have a video update that is called the YLN Update. Mike and I are on video, and we give local news as far as what's going on in the Philadelphia area music scene. And of course, don't forget the podcast. And something else that's new I want to introduce is the fact that we are featured on Here Philly with the visitphilly.com website. People who are involved with tourism here in Philadelphia, we actually are on with them every week. It's the Here Philly web section of the website of visitphilly.com. So you can check out some more stuff that we're providing as far as local music is concerned. All right, here it is, Doggone from the Miners and their EP, Miners Rebellion, right here on yourlocalnote.com.
Time spent, precious memories, and I can't help the way I feel about losing a good friend. Wounds that'll never heal, uncontrollable emotions, and the tears flood down like rain, ash residues your memory, and everlasting pain. You've been gone, I'm still down, not the same without you around. That silence deafening, and coming home is not the same. No enthusiastic greetings. I still call out your name, no escaping your memory. And signs are posted everywhere like scratches on floorboards, and traces of your hair